I mean, that's a great place to start. I've heard a ton about red light therapy. I know, the benefits of that, but I actually didn't know really much about green light therapy until I stumbled across you and started doing some digging on that. What are the benefits of green light and why should one choose one over red light?
Red light has blown up huge since the COVID lockdowns, especially. People now understand that when they're living indoors, they're shut inside. The glass blocks the near infrared, the far infrared that ordinarily human beings living outside would get. And we never gave it a second thought for decades until we realized that the mitochondria respond to red light. And so in our sort of modern industrialized world, we suffer this red light deficit, and most people are up to speed. We now have machines that will replace the red light of the sunshine. What people don't realize is that human beings were not built for full spectrum sunlight all the time. Our physiology expects the shade, and in particular, the shade of the forest. There are two wavelengths of light that dominate in shady forests all over the world. They've been measured with spectrophotometers. And it's not going to surprise you to learn, Chase, that green is one of the dominant wavelengths of light in the shady forest. The other one is near infrared, and this is just outside the visible spectrum. So people were not meant to roast on the beach, so to speak. They were meant to seek the comfort and the shade of the forest, where they're exposed to green and to red, despite the fact that there's an awakening about the importance of sunlight and your whole light environment. Green has been overlooked. And you say, well, why is that important? There is a tradition in Japan called, if I'm remembering it correctly, Shinrin Yoku. It means forest bathing. It's where people will take a walk. They'll spend several hours a week just in the forest. And everyone has known for a long time how healthy this is. It boosts the immune system. It reduces inflammation. It improves mood and reduces anxiety, and it relieves pain. And people were curious about why, and they decided that it was because a particular coniferous tree would emit something, I can't even say it right, phytosigns. It's sort of a pine smell into the air. And you would breathe this in and would have this beneficial effect on your body. And it's true. And I think they are way over crediting the phytosigns, the fresh pine smell of the forest, and overlooking the role of forest light. Because there was a clinical trial at Harvard University studying migraineurs. So these are people who have chronic and frequent migraines. They went into the Harvard lab. Now, typically, someone who's suffering a migraine headache, it will be associated with what's called photophobia. It's one of the common symptoms of migraine, where you just got to lock yourself into a dark bedroom or a closet or something and wait for the migraine to be over because the light makes the pain worse. So Harvard wanted to know, hey, do all wavelengths of light affect migraineurs the same? And these poor headache suffering people went into the Harvard lab and had Harvard test them on all the different visible wavelengths of light. And sure enough, they're all miserable except for one, and that was green. Green reduced the pain of the migraine headache. Well, that's kind of curious. University of Arizona picks up on this and they say, what if we tried using narrow band green LED light prophylactically, that is to prevent migraines? And they went, online. They bought these party LED light strips like anybody can get and tested them. And sure enough, there's something like 525 nanometers, which is very bright green. And they gave them away to their research subjects and said, sit in a dark closet. Don't stare right at the light, but let the green light sort of enter in, through the side of your eye. Do this for 45 minutes and report back to us with your headache journal. Sure enough, they got a significant reduction in the severity and frequency of migraine headaches. They said, well, that's amazing. They tried it with a fibromyalgia patient. They got a pain reduction. They tried it with a colorblind patient. They got a reduction in the severity and frequency of headaches. Green has an analgesic effect. That is, it reduces pain in people who suffer from chronic pain. One more study. Harvard's like, all right, let's commercialize this thing. And there's something called the Alley lamp. There's also a bunch of imitations out there. You can buy them on Amazon and other places. And they replicate the Harvard and University of Arizona study. They take some cheap LEDs, about 525 nanometers, and they say, hey, you can light this up 45 minutes in the dark. It'll help your headaches. And it does. Harvard said, I wonder if we could use this in a therapeutic setting for general anxiety disorder. So they lit the therapist's office, just conventional talk therapy, and they ran a controlled study, one green, the other lit with ordinary, terrible fluorescent lights. Sure enough, they observed a significant reduction in general anxiety disorder in those patients that did their traditional talk therapy lit up in green. So this is all fascinating. We all looked at this good clinical study on the mood benefits of green light. There's more about if you paint a mural on the wall of a dentist's office and the mural is like a forest scene, people calm down and they report less pain. And so there's something going on with the green. I said, well, I got to figure this out. I called a friend who's in the red light business. And I said, would you make me, one of your portable red lights? But these are the wavelengths that I want inside. I don't want the 520 that Harvard and U of A used. And the reason I didn't want it is because the peak in the forest is not 520. It just happened to be the LEDs that were available off, the party site because it's the brightest and sort of the prettiest. I wanted 530 and I wanted 545 because those are closer to what's typical of the shady forest. He said, yeah, sure, I can make that one for you. He did. It arrived from his manufacturer. He turned it on just like I'm doing right now. And he said, oh, this is garbage. He called me up and said, Tom, it's way too bright. If you didn't have a headache, this is going to give you a headache. Well, he's at Mito Red Light in Scottsdale. I said, I'll be right over. I was dating this woman who had chronic, frequent migraines. We went over together. And, for a red light guy, his office lighting is terrible. It's the same, fluorescent tubes that every other cheap office has. We're sitting on the couch. She's getting a headache. She says she's about a 6. I turn this thing on and I'm like, we'll never be able to use this. This is way too bright. Are you kidding? The alley lamp is so soft and gentle. She says, let me see that. She takes it out of my hand. She closes her eyes and she puts the light right up against her face, like right on her face. And she says, this feels really good. It takes my headache from a 6 down to about a 2. And this is how we discovered it. Chase, the alley lamp is reproducing the Harvard conditions. And that's terrific. We built this super bright double wavelength light. Now you don't have to sit in a dark closet. You just close your eyes. This blocks out all the other wavelengths of light that make the pain worse. You put the lamp maybe 6 inches away from your face. It comes with a little stand. And now the only light penetrating your closed eyes is the green. And it works fast or not at all. There are some people who get no relief. I'd say about 20% of the people who try it are like, didn't touch my headache. And then there are 80% of the people who say, this is a miracle. I've tried thousands of different medications and devices. I've got electric nerve stim stuff. I'm, drinking my electrolytes like Gary Brecka says I'm supposed to do. I'm doing everything that my doctor says, and nothing really touches my headache until this. And now they either don't need medication or they've got their pain down to a bearable. A 2 is a headache that most migraineurs would be happy to live with. Or sometimes they get all the way down to 0 and it happens right away. It is now, this is my green lamp. It's now the most powerful, sort of accidentally, my green is now the most powerful green phototherapy device for pain and anxiety relief in the world. And nobody really cares. It's not like Google, is directing people to the migraine site. There just aren't enough searches for green light headache relief. Everybody's still sort of caught up on red. but I went on the Danny Jones podcast. I flew all the way down to Florida, and he and I are talking about it. And I brought him one because his wife suffers from headaches. And we got the thing out, and I showed him how it works and everything like that. If you go on the Danny Jones podcast, you can hear about how there's an underwater $1 trillion city, I don't know, in the Pacific Ocean that's been funded by the CIA and it's populated by aliens. If that's your stuff, you go to Danny Jones. You can also hear Professor Seager tell you that green light will relieve headaches. And by the way, we never landed on the moon. It's all fake. Chase, nobody believes that the green light works. Even the people who call me up and say, I don't have a headache. They're like, I can't believe it. It's one of those things that people should be talking about more and trying more. But it sounds so ridiculous. Oh, you put the green light up on your face and it takes the pain away? Yes. The Harvard scientists don't know how. The University of Arizona people, they don't know how. They don't know what's going on in the brain that shuts off the pain. Now, you talk to Jack Cruz, at least on Twitter, he'll say, oh, well, hemoglobin is red. I mean, duh. What did you think? Hemoglobin absorbs green. And I'm not disputing that. Of course it does. But the green light doesn't penetrate like the way that red light will. Red light will, because the wavelengths are longer, it will penetrate your body up to several centimeters, and it will stimulate the mitochondria even below the skin. Green, no. Green's going to make it several millimeters. I doubt it's the action of green being absorbed by hemoglobin that is really the mode that relieves pain. I think it must be operating on the level of the nervous system, going in through the eyes and stimulating the optic nerve in a way that relaxes the body, that takes away the anxiety, that releases the sort of tension in the brain that is associated with migraine and other forms of pain. I think it does what the shady forest has done for people for, millennia. It's a story. It's not even a scientific explanation. But when people write to me and say, thank goodness for your green light device, I'm going to keep investigating as best I can. Why does it work? And provide people with more options. Is it 545? Is it 530? Run your own experiment. See if it works for you.
Is there any benefit? I know with red light, they've created like these large panels to expose your whole body and you stand in front of it. Is there any benefit to doing that with the green light panel and having a larger one?
Green has been used therapeutically for other reasons. You can buy, for example, a green light bed. You can get a red light bed, and some of them have green modes in it as well. And so, uh, to some extent, green lasers have been used to remove liver spots or age spots. Green can be used to destroy melanin. So if you have a spot on your skin that you don't want, you can use green. Green will also promote wound healing. And so green and red together might be very good for healing lesions on the skin. So there could be reasons to use green on the body in like a full panel. And I don't know what those reasons necessarily are. What I want to do is run more experiments to see if green will help, say, a skin laceration. You have a cut or something or a lesion heal more quickly. Red will promote healing because it stimulates the mitochondria, and green might do the same. And here, it really could be the mechanism of absorption by hemoglobin in the skin. However, the whole body, probably not the mode of action through the optic nerve to reduce pain. I have one customer, after the Danny Jones podcast, she bought a green light, came in the mail. She said, I didn't have a migraine, but my menstrual cramps were terrible. I put the green light on my belly to let the green get as close to her uterus as she could. She goes, 20 minutes later, my menstrual cramps were gone. Chase, I have no explanation for this. It's never been replicated. So I don't want to, it's a wonderful source of hypotheses. I don't want to say, no, those full panel green light, they don't do anything. There's something going on with the green. When we're in the forest, of course, we experience the light of the shady forest, not just through our eyes, but over our whole body. Red will penetrate your clothing. Green will not. And
Ooh.
so unless we're running around naked in the shady forest, we're not, going to be exposed whole body. But then I can think of some circumstances where running around naked in the shady forest sounds pretty good. So perhaps we shouldn't be too quick to write it off.
Well, I was gonna say, like, evolutionarily, we probably were, like, or at least very minimally
Right. Right.
clothed, so we probably were exposed.
Think about it. I'm a cold guy, right? I'm
Yeah.
the guy who says you should be like the Vikings in the North Sea or something like that. And some people will come at me and say, well, my ancestors are from more equatorial climates. The cold isn't really good for me. And to them, I've always said nonsense. During the Ice Age, there were there are 4 modern glaciers in East Africa right now. During the Ice Age, the mountains of East Africa were covered with ice and snow. And that's where we found the oldest human fossils. If you believe there's a Garden of Eden, it was in East Africa, And I believe that, at least as a metaphor, of course there was. Human beings were placed on this earth, and it was in a place with cold water, because we didn't survive that ice age as a species without foraging in the cold, without eating the fish, without eating the foods that, like the shellfish, that lived in the cold. We as a species were meant to be cold. But I don't know that means we were meant to run around naked in Siberia. Like, I think there is something about the shady forest, even in warm climates, that is healthy, both for mood and for promoting metabolism, but in particular, stimulating or calming the nervous system in the right way. And this is just another story, but suppose, you are being chased by that saber-toothed tiger. This is sort of in our imagination before human beings wiped out all the megafauna outside Africa. Where would you, or I should say, your great ancestors, have sought shelter? I'm going up a tree.
Yeah.
I'll take it. There's something about the shady forest that says a comfort and safety, at least the ones that have enough light penetrating them to expose you to that near infrared and that green.
I'm about to head to the gym. I hope you guys get some movement in today as well. But I just wanted to jump in here really quick and say I appreciate you guys listening. If you could do me one more quick favor, just leave a review or a like or a follow or a subscribe wherever you guys are watching. It helps so much. It lets me get more viewers, all that fun stuff. I get more guests, and really it just lets me do this with better efficiency, give you guys a better product, because I can show the analytics to these guests and say, hey guys, look, it is worth your time to be here. I've got all these amazing listeners. So just do me a huge favor, like, follow, review, all that nonsense, and then enjoy the episode and go get some movement in. Thank you guys. I always said growing up, and my favorite color was green, and people ask, oh, what shade of green? And I was like, oh, the light that filters through the leaves? That's my favorite color. And I always
That's
said that
neat.
since I was in
Yeah.
like second grade. I have always appreciated that color of green. I've been reading recently about the late 1700 invention of the Perkins tractor, and then John Haygarth's invention of like placebo, and like knowing how powerful placebo is and applying that to everything. Like I've applied that, like I do sauna, I take supplements, I take, magnesium, and a lot of that, like that book and reading about that has really made me realize how strong the placebo effect actually is. And not that that takes away from anything that you're using. I mean, it enhances it really to some degree, but how can we know how much of these things, whether it be cold, be red light, green light, are placebo versus, actionable things?
You can do placebo-controlled trials.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind that when Harvard was doing their study, they compared green to white, they compared it to darkness, and they compared it to all the other wavelengths. And so if there were a placebo effect and it only showed up in green, you'd be like, "Oh, that's an incredibly bad coincidence."
Yeah.
This isn't a placebo. However, placebos are great. Like, just try and get an open label placebo trial filed, funded from the National Institute of Health. You're like, here's what I want to do. I want to give people a pill that has nothing in it, I will tell them it has nothing in it, but they'll take it for whatever condition it is, and we will notice improvement without side effects, without risk. The NIH, you'd think, might be interested, but of course they're not, because people write off placebo as if it isn't science. So I had an argument with one of my faculty colleagues who was sort of coming around to my crazy ideas. You can imagine how, at the university, I work at Arizona State University, and there's a lot of skepticism about the way I've taken my career. But he was coming around and he said, Tom, I think there really is something to this cold and this green and these things you're talking about. I don't think you're crazy. I mean, it's not like those people who are adding a drop of water to a whole 10,000 liters and saying, that they get the beneficial effect. And I'm like, do you mean homeopathy? And he goes, yeah, those crazy people. I said, well, let's look at this. Medical errors are either the third leading cause of death in the United States or the first, depending upon which database you cite. At least the homeopathy isn't going to kill you. Like, I'm a big fan of placebo. Now, I'm a big fan of green, and I'm a big fan of cold. When you get into an ice bath, you know it's working. You know it's not a placebo effect. You feel that it's working. And I don't sell placebos, but I support placebos. There's also the opposite of the placebo effect, and it's called the nocebo effect. When you tell yourself the story about how deadly or damaging something is, it's deadly and damaging. There's this really interesting book called The Upside of Stress, written by Kelly McGonigal. She's a faculty member at Stanford University. And we, in our modern, American culture, we crap on stress. We have these sort of saying, oh, the stress is killing me. And what Kelly McGonigal, when she went into the literature, discovered is that if you believe the stress is killing you, it is. Your beliefs about stress are much more influential than the actual experience of the stress. So when you tell yourself a story about how, oh, this is difficult, this is challenging, this is going to make me stronger, it becomes the hormetic stress. That is, it supports your body psychologically and physiologically, your response to the stress to do exactly the story you're telling yourself, making yourself stronger. When you tell yourself the stress is killing you, it does. The people's attitudes towards stress was the single greatest predictor of who showed up in the obituary column 7 years later when they were checking on this study. Kelly McGonigal didn't do the work, but she's most responsible for popularizing the work, for interpreting it so that people could understand the nocebo effect better. Do not let those negative thoughts and words, creep into your self-talk, because it is that which is killing you.
I completely believe that. I completely believe that the nocebo is just as effective and prominent as a placebo. 100%. I mean,
Yep.
you can see that in not just like the physical, but also the mental. I mean, you see that the negative thoughts come in and they destroy your life. They stop you from doing the things that you want to do or
Yep.
should do or could do, and it keeps you happy and comfortable and boring and sad.
Yep.
Well, speaking of stress, speaking of cold, you're the cold guy. You mentioned it. I was going to mention it if you didn't. You're CEO and a co-founder of the Morozko.
You're doing great.
I know.
That's exactly how you say it.
Morozko.
Morozko. So, Morozko is a Russian fairy tale
Morozko.
character.
Yeah, Jack Frost.
And nobody says it right until I'll go to a conference and, somebody from Russia might show up and they'll go, oh, Morozko, you know about Morozko. And I can't even talk like that. But that's the name of the company. It's a metaphor. Morozko is this sort of evil, he punishes the children of Siberia if they don't behave or don't obey their parents, right? But according to the story, when the young girl went out into the forest exactly as her stepmother told her and gathered up the meager sticks of firewood, knowing how dangerous it was and that her stepmother never really wanted her to come back, and she meets Morozko, and Morozko says, aren't you scared of me? And she says, no. And Morozko says, but don't you know who I am? And she says, yes, I know who you are, Morozko. And he says, but aren't you cold? And she says, I'm warm enough. Morozko will reward the good little children who are brave and courageous. He gives her gifts and a fur coat and makes her a princess. What a wonderful metaphor. If you get into the cold, like Joe Rogan says, like a little bitch, and you're whining about it and complaining about it and screaming, Morozko will punish you with pain. But when you get into the cold, like a prince or a princess, like royalty, and you maintain your grace, and you remember to breathe, Morozko will reward you with the superpowers of the cold. So yeah, we founded this ice bath company. We called it Morozko, and Google hated us. We should have called it besticebathforyou.com, or something totally Chinese. We would have gone up to the top of the Google rankings. And to this day, if you search ice bath, it doesn't matter that I'm now the world's foremost expert on the science of ice baths. I've written 2 books on this, It doesn't matter that we make the best and most expensive ice bath in the world. If you search ice bath, we're like number 52 on Google. But if you search Morozko, we are the number 1 Google search result for 4 different misspellings of Morozko. And so I'm going to say that is successful branding.
I mean, it's certainly the most beautiful branding in relation to a story. Like it's so fitting because I mean, if you get into an ice bath, you actually know exactly what you're talking about and exactly how that story relates. If somebody gets in and they're like, "Oh, I'm so cold," and start shaking, and they're like, "Oh, this is miserable," versus if you get in, you're like, "Okay, this is cold, but I'm not going to show it." You feel a lot more control, and that's so appropriate.
The way you talk to yourself in the ice bath makes all the difference in the world. When you say, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm going to die. This is killing me. What are you, crazy?" You get about 11 seconds, maybe 45 if you're really tough. But if you say, "Oh, this is what cold feels like. My toes feel cold. My fingers feel cold. I'm starting to shiver." If you're able to narrate your experience without the judgment of it, you can do 2 minutes, no problem. And you don't really have to go beyond the point of shivering to get the benefits. So if your tub is 50 degrees, you're going to have to be in there a lot longer. If your tub is 33, or like mine was yesterday, 31 degrees, and I only did like 30 seconds yesterday, but that was a rough go. If your tub is colder, then don't do more than 2 or 3 minutes. You're fine.
With the cold plunge, a lot of protocol, especially we're hearing a lot more recently, there's like the negative effects on hypertrophy. Don't do it after training. And then I've heard you talk about pre-cooling as well, doing it first thing and then warming back up prior to your exercise session. Which would you recommend and why?
Pre-cooling. You don't have to spend much time on my Twitter feed or my Instagram to know that I'm recommending pre-cooling. But it's a lot of fun to see the replies. People who say, "That's a terrible idea. There's no data. There's no science. Pre-cooling is a good way to injure yourself." And I will still write back to some of those people and I'll say, "Oh, you must have had a terrible experience. You must have gotten in the ice bath, pre-cooled for 3 minutes, just like I told you to do, and then did some squats or some kettlebells or some stairs or maybe some push-ups and ripped your tendons all to crap." And they go, "No, there has never been any report of any injury resulting from pre-cooling." And I'm not saying they don't happen. I'm saying I need this case study. I want to hear this. And if Dr. James, the pharmacist, is going to get 110,000 clicks on Instagram for saying that pre-cooling is how you injure yourself, I want to see one of those people who's clicking saying, "This was my story. This is what I did. Dr. James never injured himself with an ice bath. None of my customers have ever reported an injury with an ice bath. And yet Wikipedia would have you believe that if you do an ice bath, you're going to die. Even Kelly McGonigal in her book, The Upside of Stress. So here's a Stanford faculty member, right? And she's talking about something called the cold pressor test. This is a standardized psychological instrument for measuring the response to stress. Typically, you take the non dominant hand of a subject and you put it in a bowl of ice water, and then you can measure their pulse or their sweat rate or how loudly they swear. You can measure their response to stress. In particular, how long can they stand it? And in her description of the cold pressor test, she says, for you get an idea of how difficult this is. If you were to submerge your entire body in water that cold for 2 minutes, it would kill you. Well, I don't know. I've done 2,500 ice baths or something like that. I must have died a long time ago. Kelly McGonigal has evidently never done a whole body ice bath like in a Morozko. And she's never talked to Craig Heller, her colleague at Stanford University, who does what's called cooling. He extracts heat from the palms through a device that he's invented called the Cool Mitt. Now, when you're in the middle of a workout or you're between sets and you're able to extract heat from the palms, Craig measures as a first approximation, which is an exaggeration, an infinite, increase in your endurance. Now, I'm exaggerating, but he took trained athletes. These are the 49ers football players, brought them into the lab and said, all right, well, how many dips can you do? They can do a lot of dips. He said, well, now we're going to cool you between sets. Now how many you can do? They could go forever. He took his untrained graduate students and he got huge boosts in the number of pull-ups that they can do. It's peak power output and endurance that you get when you extract heat from the body. And most people aren't arguing about the heat extraction through the palms. But when a British team, so this is in the United Kingdom, they said, well, we don't believe that. We're going to, see if these results replicate. They published a paper saying, nope, the results do not replicate. And I'm like, how can this be? How can Craig Heller, get such great results in a number of studies in his lab at Stanford, and these UK people can't get the same effect? I compared their methods. The tricky thing about cooling through the palms is that vasoconstriction shuts off the circulation. So your palm gets cold, but your body doesn't. The Cool Mitt applies a vacuum to keep the blood moving through the palms. In the United Kingdom, when they were doing palm cooling, no vacuum. It's no wonder they couldn't replicate the results. They were using a different method. But the headline on their paper says, palm cooling doesn't work. So here's the problem, Chase. There's a lot of idiots on Instagram and elsewhere who don't know anything, who haven't experienced it for themselves. Some of them have credentials and big followings, and they will publish things that aren't substantiated by data or by personal experiences. And the viewers who don't want to do the cold will mash that like button until the algorithm makes you believe that it's true. There are some other people who have who've done the homework, who've been to the library, who've tested these things for themselves and have a pretty good understanding of how it works. If you want to use cold to recover from a session of serious exercise where you're going to experience delayed onset muscle soreness, where your joints are really aching, maybe you're a tennis player and you're in the US Open and it's humid and it's hot and you've just won and you've got to get ready for the next match, get right into that ice bath. Because it will reduce muscle soreness. It will reduce inflammation. It will speed your preparation for the next competition. Golfers, there's another multi-day tournament. And maybe we don't think of golf as strenuous or something, but if you've just done your 18 holes and you want to get ready for the next day of the tournament, use the ice bath after exercise. Tour de France, those guys have got to be in the ice bath so they can get ready for the next day. I'm going to be 60 this year. I'm a college professor. I'm not training for the Tour de France, and I'm never going to be in the US Open. I use exercise after my ice bath. I use exercise to recover from the cold, not the other way around. So I'll go in for 2 or 3 minutes and then I'll just do light exercise. I have my steel mace that I like a lot. I'll do some lunges with my kettlebells, squats. I do have a barbell so I can put a little weight on my squat. But when I started just walking, I get reports from people, men older than me, who have boosted their testosterone levels above where mine are. One guy in Massachusetts in his 60s who sent me his report, he's at like 1240 nanograms per deciliter, which is supra normal. And all he does is soccer mom walk home after he jumps in the pond. It doesn't take a lot of exercise. Nobody is saying go heavy after your ice bath. They're saying just do the exercise that will rewarm your limbs. If you want to go heavy after that, that's up to you. But people all over are sending me reports and experiences saying, I pre-cooled, I set a personal best. I pre-cooled and I've never felt fatigued. I pre-cooled and I felt more energy than I've ever applied to my workout. Those people don't have a million followers on Instagram, but you can read about them, in Uncommon Cold or in Uncommon Testosterone, because I'm doing the best I can to try and get the truth out there.
Well, that was going to be my question. If we pre-cool, like, what should be the proper time before we start to get heavy? But you answered that there. So pre-cool, warm the body back up to a regular temperature through lighter movements, lunges, body weight things,
Doesn't have to
and
be all the
then
way.
okay.
I had an experience where I did too much. I was in the Morozko, so we're about 34 degrees. It was summertime, and I was trying to impress a girl. I stayed in there too long. And we had an appointment to go to hot yoga, and I couldn't drive. I drive a stick. I'd lost all fine motor control. Like my brain wasn't working. And I did 14 minutes, at 34 degrees, which was too much. So I had to stand out in the sunshine before we could go to the hot yoga. I got myself to the point where I probably shouldn't drive, but I did. We got there late. They let us in anyway. And now we're in the middle of, half monkey moon twist, whatever the hell poses is supposed to be. And I wasn't taking the directions from the instructor very well. So she came over and she repositioned me like with her hands because my brain wasn't working right. And then I had this great session. Afterwards, she came up to me and she said, was it cold enough? I mean, was it hot enough for you in there? Because when I put my hands on your back, your skin felt cold. And I go, look, what was it, like 110? It was plenty hot. I started to break a sweat at the end there. She goes, I don't know. I didn't see you sweating at all. And I had to explain the whole ice bath thing. The cold or starting your exercise, you don't have to get yourself back up to your sort of normal temperature. It is okay to still feel like you're chilled when you want to start your workout. But when I come out of the cold, of course I start light. What you're trying to do is to get the blood back into your extremities. The vasoconstriction has shut off that blood circulation, moved it all into your core to protect your core body temperature. You do some light exercise to open up your blood vessels. You don't have to be completely rewarmed to start your workout. If you're feeling a little bit cold when you're starting whatever your normal workout would be, you're going to get some benefits.
You mentioned staying in there a little too long to impress a girl. We've all done that. But that was around 14 minutes. What is your take on people like Wim Hof who are doing like these long sessions in these cold, and what's the difference there, and what are they getting from it?
Vim is breaking a world record.
Yeah.
Vim is trying to show people the extreme extent to which a human body can actually handle stress. It is remarkable how resilient people are. And so if Wim cuts a hole, in the Arctic Ocean, and he says, I'm going to swim under the ice and I'm going to come out this other hole, that's going to take me 5 minutes to reach or something like that. This is sensational. We want to
Mm.
see this. Nobody wants to watch the tightrope walker, walk across your living room floor. We want to see him walk across Niagara Falls. And so Vim has been very successful drawing attention by doing these sensational things to the benefits of the cold. That doesn't mean you have to do it. You don't have to, tightrope walk across Niagara Falls to understand the benefits of balance. And so I think Vim's great. And I'm not trying to get into the Guinness Book of World Records. So I do 2 to 3
Understood.
minutes. It's fine.
So, what would be the recommended protocol? Let's say somebody had a Morozko and then somebody only had a cold shower in winter. How should they utilize this, and how many times a week should they do
I have hated every minute of every cold shower I have ever taken. And so
it?
I much prefer the ice bath. If you're just starting out with cold, you go cold enough to gasp and long enough to shiver. I know that if you go to Grok or Chat GPT, it will tell you, no, there is one perfect temperature and it applies to everyone. And there is one ideal time at duration, and everyone should do it exactly like this, because all these artificial intelligence agents are trained on Reddit. And so what they do is scan Reddit, or they scan Twitter, or they scan Wikipedia, and they average out everything that everyone is saying, and they report to you the average of the ignoramuses who are repeating all of this false stuff. If you ask, say, ChatGPT, I'm thinking about starting a weight training program. What's the ideal weight? It will give you very reasonable advice about, oh, you should choose a weight that you can do maybe 12 reps to failure. The last rep is like really difficult. We don't know what's right for you because we don't know what your prior state of weight training is. But if you ask about cold, all of a sudden there's one prescription that is right no matter your age, your body, or your prior state of cold training. You go cold enough to gasp and long enough to shiver, because nobody knows how well adapted you are to the cold until you get into the cold plunge. You will find after 2 weeks that you do acclimate. Your vasoconstriction response gets better. Your heart rate doesn't spike as much at first. It will come down in the ice bath because of what's called the dive reflex. Your parasympathetic tone, which isn't really a scientific word, but it's about the way your vagus nerve operates. It will get stronger. The initial cortisol response that you get when you first start cold plunging becomes muted. And so as you acclimate, you'll find that the cold plunge gets more boring. You've got to keep dropping the temperature to get the same gasp reflex. That's the sympathetic nervous system activation until you get down, where me and Joe Rogan and some other people are. You're in the Morozko, it's 33 degrees. You never get used to that. You stare at that ice and you say, I could probably skip a day. The worst part of the ice bath is the 15 seconds right before you get into the ice, where you feel miserable and wretched in anticipation of what you're about to do. 30 seconds later, you're probably thinking like me, what was I even worried about? Why do I do
Mhm.
that every morning? I hesitate before I get in. Joe Rogan told Matthew McConaughey, every morning, I almost don't get in. And I know exactly what he's talking about. And every morning, I'm kind of looking around, the sun's coming up, and I'm saying, why am I such a wimp about this? I've done this thousands of times, because after the dive reflex kicks in, that parasympathetic response, your heart rate drops, you calm down, your breath, especially if you're intentionally structuring it, will slow down, and you begin to feel like $1,000,000. And this is why I hate cold showers. You don't get any dive reflex. You get the
Mm.
gasp reflex. You get the I hate my life right now reflex, but you never get that calm, sympathetic nervous system response. And I'm not only speaking to my own experience, I'm speaking to a study done in Finland comparing partial cold stimulation. So there's just one arm or half an arm with whole body when you get into the cold plunge. And they're measuring heart rate and they're measuring the different responses. And they see that cold pressure test will keep you in sympathetic mode and never activate the dive reflex. Whereas if you're doing the whole body and you structure your breath and you've got one of those good mantras about, oh, this is what cold feels like, everything calms down. And when I tried an ice bath for the first time, I said, this is for me. I live in
Mm.
Phoenix, Arizona. It's the hottest city in North America. There's no, cold shower available to me in the summertime because the tap
Mhm.
water comes out. It's almost 88 degrees. I need a Morozko.
I'm talking to people smarter than me every single podcast, and yet here I am struggling to record these stupid intermission breaks. Guys, do me a favor, leave a review, leave a follow, leave a subscribe, whatever that looks like with the platform that you're on. I don't want to do this. You guys don't want me doing this, but it helps a ton. It lets me find more listeners. It lets the show get pushed out to more people. And in turn, I get more guests for you guys to listen to. I really appreciate y'all. I'm just stumbling my way through this. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much. Let's get back to the episode. Well, it's so funny how our brains are so good at negotiating out of the things that we know we should do. Even if we do it 1,000 times, if it's hard, we negotiate, we try to find a way out. As Rogan says, as you brought up, it's the inner bitch, the bitch voice comes up. Now, obviously, my brother went to ASU. He's out in Phoenix, so I'm familiar. It's hot. It gets very hot. Summers are almost unlivable, and the water does run out hot.
Now listen to that self-talk, Chase. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Fair enough.
I'll walk across campus, it'll be 115, and I'll say, oh, I guess I just saved money on a sauna. If I want a sauna, I just need to park my car in the sunshine. It'll be 180 degrees underneath my windshield before I know it. Listen to that self-talk. I'm getting my steps,
But not everybody can, as you mentioned, the Morozkos they're up there, thousands, tens of thousands as well.
They're so expensive.
Yeah, and no cold plunges tend to be super available. And also, you've got people living in apartments and not good places to put them. In that case, is a shower better, a cold shower as cold as you can get it, better than nothing, especially in winter? Or is it?
Metabolically, it is. The psychological benefits, for me, exceed the physiological benefits. And I love the physiological benefits. I got my testosterone up. I got my HbA1c down. I got my triglyceride to HDL ratio to like 0.5, which means I'm insulin sensitive. This is a wonderful thing for a 60-year-old man because every single leading cause of death in the United States originates in insulin resistance. You want longevity, you've got to maintain insulin sensitivity, and cold plunge is one of the best ways to do it. So if all you've got is the shower, do the shower. But the other things that you mentioned are bullshit excuses. I live on the 32nd floor. I got my Morozko on a balcony. Don't tell me that you don't have room, to put your little cold plunge. Now, it's true that I own the company, so I had a small one made just for me. We will make a small one just for you. If you're in Miami and some high-rise apartment or something like that, you send us some measurements and we'll make it. Now, it is true that Morozko is expensive. It is not easy to do manufacturing in America. When you discover something that Americans want to buy, the Chinese will be right on your heels. And they will send you pictures on Alibaba or something like that that say, we're almost just as good as what you can get that is made in Phoenix. And they will be 1/3 the cost. A lot of people can't justify the cost of paying 3 times more for a Morozko than they would if they were getting buying from the Chinese. If budget is a problem, there's a couple things you can do. I have a friend, he's in Tempe, he runs Desert Plunge. He will attach a reliable chiller to a grizzly cooler. It will stay cold. It won't go all the way down to freezing and it won't make ice, but he's an honest businessman. You can buy something from Desert Plunge and it is about 1/3 of a cost of a Morozko. The other thing you can do if you want to buy the Chinese product is you can go to ambor.com. They have like 5 warehouses in the United States. This is a Chinese company. They make their plunges for plunge. So you can go to plunge.com and you can get an Ambor, but you'll pay more at plunge.com than you will from ambor.com. If what you want is a cheap plunge with no customer service, no ice, and it's not grounded and you can't put minerals in it, but at least it gets cold, there are plenty of alternatives. They've all come into the market after Morozko. Most of our customers are people more like my age, especially men, and they're saying, I've got plenty of money. I'm looking for the things that money can't buy. I'm looking for health. I'm looking for longevity. And I do not believe that if I buy pills from David Sinclair that I'm going to live forever. I'm not ready to like take blood out of my teenage son and transfuse it into myself until I look like a vampire the way Brian Johnson is doing. And they'll say, is there anything I can do? And I'll say, well, yes. $15,000 gets you a Morozko. $15,000 will put it in your home so that you don't drive to the gym or to the spa or whatever, so that you're not going to the store to buy, 200 pounds of ice or something. So you can get in there whenever you want and you can just do a couple of minutes. When Jack Kruse started talking about leptin and he started talking about cold, there was no such thing as Morozko. This goes back, 10 years, maybe 2017, and Morozko didn't even make its first sale until 2019. And the only way to really do an ice bath was to go to the Quickie Mart, buy like 150 pounds of ice, put it in like a stock tank or a Rubbermaid garbage can or something like that. And if you go through all that trouble, you can get the water down to about 45, and you're going to stay in there for half an hour because you want to get your money's worth out of all of that inconvenience. And so Jack was saying, look, this is how I do it, 45, 50 degrees, and I do 25, 30 minutes. But once you have a Morozko and it's cold all the time and there's ice floating around in there, you can do 3 minutes and you can get like a heck of a lot of benefit without all of the trouble. Some people will spend, $72,000 on a car and they'll say, $10,000 Morozko, I just can't justify. It's too expensive for me, but I'm going to pay for this car for the next 6 years of my life. The Morozko is going to make those next 6 years better. So a lot of this is bullcrap excuses for why people don't want to part with their money. And I get it. Where does their money go? It goes to Phoenix, Arizona. It goes to my craftsmen. It goes to the people who are actually making these things in America. It does not go to Joe Rogan. We've never paid him a dime. It does not go to Google for advertising. It does not go to, expensive influencers who charge me a ton of money to try and trick people into buying my product. It doesn't even go to me. I draw a salary from ASU. I publish these books. If you want to know anything that I've ever written, it's all available for free on Morozko. It goes to pay for the steel and the copper and the wood and the people who handcraft these machines. So if that's the story you need to tell yourself about feeling okay, spending more than 10 grand on an ice bath that is going to reverse your type 2 diabetes or resolve your chronic inflammation or resolve your Hashimoto's autoimmune disorder, then that's a perfectly good story. Come visit us anytime. I will introduce you to the people who make these ice baths.
I will say your ice baths are definitely in my opinion, the most robust and aesthetically pleasing. I love the style. I love the way they look. And every single image of those versus the other ones is you see like these massive ice chunks that are just floating on the top. Is that you talk about that purposely. What is the purpose of having visible ice chunks?
Okay, there's a few things going on. The visible ice chunks are good for Instagram. We call it Instagram ice. How else would
Yeah.
you know how cold the water is? And that's a legit marketing tool. But there's something else. Tim Noakes, he's really active on Twitter since Elon Musk bought Twitter and they let him back on. Tim Noakes is a physician and a PhD from South Africa, and he supervised Lewis Pugh's Antarctic swims. So Lewis Pugh is this British guy, and he does these record-breaking swims to try and draw attention to the environment and the plight of the oceans. He swam the Arctic. Most recently, he swam the Hudson River from New York City up to Troy, and he's going to swim the Antarctic. He's jumping off an iceberg, and he's going into the water, and Tim Noakes is his medical supervisor. Tim's monitoring Lewis Pugh's core body temperature. And he noticed that the core body temperature goes up before he even gets in the water. Now, how is this possible? Tim sees that Lewis Pugh is warming himself because he's anticipating the cold water. And Noakes coined this new phrase called anticipatory thermogenesis. You can activate your brown fat solely with the power of your mind. When you see the ice chunks floating around, you get the anticipation of what you're about to do, and it makes it all the more miserable. Now, why do you want to be miserable? When we choose the uncomfortable things, when we voluntarily sign up for the suffering, it makes the whole rest of our life, so much better. Oh, I don't know. Your, teenager is upset because something the teacher said at school. Doesn't bother you. Your department chair calls you down for another meeting, chastising you because of something that you put on Twitter. No big deal. I did 3 minutes of my Morozko this morning. There's nothing bad that can happen to me the whole rest of my day. Having the ice chunks in there is just a marketing Instagram gimmick. It also changes the psychology of what you're doing. Having them floating around, your clavicles and bumping up against your earlobes while you're in the ice changes the experience of the ice bath. And that's important to me. But a couple other things. You said that you really like the wood look. It's also intentional. When we started Morozko, I met with a woman in Scottsdale, and she was sort of a marketing expert. And I don't know anything about marketing. I'm an engineering faculty member. And she says, you've got to do something about the look. She says, your product looks like it was built in a barn. I said, I wish I had a barn. We were making them in the backyard. We were making them in the sun of Phoenix, Arizona, at 115 degrees. That's where we worked. Morozko is supposed to bring you closer to nature. So I've seen a lot of other products come out, and in particular the Chinese ones, and they're smooth, molded, white plastic. Somebody was in Cabo, and they were at a biohacking spa, and they sent me pictures of a machine called the Infra Slimmer. And this is totally not the way Morozko is marketed. The Infra Slimmer is this red light machine that you get in, and supposedly it releases lipids and shrinks your fat cells or something like that. And I wrote back to him, it looks like something out of the Empire Stormtrooper boot camp. When you think about Morozko, we're built like the Millennium Falcon. We're like the Rebel Alliance. You remember what Luke Skywalker said, 1977 to Han Solo? What a piece of junk. And then Han Solo says, well, you try doing the Kessel Run in 24 parts or whatever that. I don't remember exactly. But we are never going to come out with that Chinese smooth, plastic, sleek look and call it the cold limmer or, whatever the heck it is. It is always going to be rooted in nature. Having said that, the least expensive unit is now foam. It's got no wood. It's coated with a polyurea Line-X coating. We bring the cost down. Some people really like the white. But the best way to get your cold is to jump in the Pacific Ocean, jump in the fjord, jump in the natural body of water. I just don't have that in Phoenix, Arizona. So I want to get you as close to nature. I want, like, if you accidentally hit your Morozko with your steel mace or your kettlebell and you put a dent in it, I want you to say, good. It's a forge. It's meant to take a beating, just like you, because we're all going to get hit in our lives. And every single ding makes us all the more unique, makes us all the more, hopefully, stronger, more resilient to the next one. That's what we want it to mean when you get a forge. We want it to be durable and resilient, tough, just like you are. Try hitting your Ambor with a steel mace accidentally. You'll be back on Ambor.com buying a new one right away.
I have not had the opportunity to try Morozko, but I was on your site and I found that you can locate them nearby, and I've got like 3. I'm in Denver, so there's like a couple
great.
right by me. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward. I'm absolutely gonna go try a Morozko because they look beautiful, and I want to go try one out. So if somebody's listening, they're like, hey, if I want a cold plunge, I'm convinced with Morozko. Could you list off some benefits that they could expect to see in, let's say, a first day, a 2 week, and then like a 3 month timeline?
Um, Number one benefit is you feel amazing. Not at first. At first, you feel like an idiot. At first, you say, "Why am I doing this?" And then you come out. Maybe if you're lucky enough, you get some sunshine. You do some rewarming exercises. You feel amazing for hours. That's the number one benefit. A few things happen inside your body metabolically, and some things happen psychologically. So there's your physiology and there's your psychology. Most people suffer from a detachment from nature. Morozko's grounded. You are instantaneously electrically balanced back to the earth as soon as you get into the Morozko. Now, when you're in your car or on your synthetic carpet or with your synthetic shoes, you wind up disconnected from ground. This changes the viscosity of your blood and it slows the blood flow down. So you get an immediate grounding benefit from the Morozko. You can put Epsom salt, which is magnesium sulfate, in your Morozko. We're coming out with a mineral bag. You can put magnesium, zinc, and copper and potassium in your Morozko, and you absorb all of these transdermally. And it turns out magnesium is super important for mitochondria and for cold thermogenesis. So you can get a mineral benefit from the Morozko. And we haven't even started talking about the cold yet. The cold will recruit new brown fat to your body. It used to be that medical doctors thought there was no such thing as brown fat in adult human beings. We all knew infants had it, and it's the way that infants stay warm. If you've seen those pictures, in Denmark of the little babies in the strollers outside in the snow or something like that, those babies aren't shivering. Their muscles are not mature enough to shiver. They're using non-shivering cold thermogenesis. They have brown fat all through them, and it's the brown fat that is keeping them warm because it's producing heat. Adults lose it if they don't stay cold. And it's a tragedy because brown fat and the thyroid, they work together. They're in constant communication. If you don't get cold and you lose all your brown fat, your thyroid has nothing to communicate with. It's no wonder it becomes dysregulated. That could be Graves', it could be Hashimoto's, but it's not modulated by its communication with the brown fat. And so cold, about 2 weeks, you will recruit new brown fat and you will fix thyroid and metabolic disorders. That brown fat is packed full of mitochondria because it's the mitochondria that are generating the heat in the first place. The best way to stimulate what's called mitobiogenesis, this is the production of new mitochondria, is cold. Exercise will do it. There's some foods like ginger and cinnamon and hot peppers that will activate brown fat, but nothing is as good as cold. Let me rephrase that. Cold is the best way to stimulate your mitobiogenesis, to rejuvenate your mitochondria. And that has the effect of improving your insulin sensitivity. So physiologically, you're going to get this big metabolic fix. If you are a woman, your testosterone is produced in 4 places in your body: the ovaries, but that's only about 25% of total testosterone. And the ovaries are nowhere near as active post menopause, but the ovaries are one: the skin cells, the fat cells, and the adrenal glands. The best way to stimulate your skin cells, fat cells, and adrenal glands is an ice bath. And so women will get an immediate testosterone boost from the ice bath. Men, they have to exercise afterwards. So you get in the ice bath, you get out, you do your light rewarming exercise, you will get a testosterone boost. So there's not just an improvement in your insulin sensitivity, but it's a rebalancing of your sex hormones. If women are too high because they have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the most common reason for women being too high in testosterone, that's associated with insulin resistance, and the ice bath will bring it back down. For men, I'm 60 years old. Last time I tested, I was still over 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. For men, it is like the elixir of life. It feels like the fountain of youth to have high testosterone. You maintain that competitive drive that keeps you motivated to do great things in the world. So physiologically, you get the metabolism and you get the sex hormones. Psychologically, there is something about the cold that improves psychological resilience, that boosts your resistance or your management of stress. When you are doing this pendulation between the sympathetic, the gas reflex, and the parasympathetic. You might find that you are better able to deal with all the other sympathetic activations in your life. But in particular, shivering is a way to release stress. And this is all mammals that I've noticed so far. I'm getting this from Peter Levine. He talks about somatic healing, and he's written quite a bit. Not shivering in the cold, he calls it trembling. When people are carrying unresolved stressful experiences, we call that trauma. And he's observed among his patients that when they go through the somatic, that is the embodied experience of the trembling, they will release that captured stress. There have been times when I'm at a low point. I'm anxious. I'm worried. I just had a fight with somebody whom I love, and I'm concerned about how I behaved or how they're going to behave towards me. And I will get into that ice bath, and it'll take like 10 seconds, and I will start shivering. It's not because of the cold. It's because of the stress that has yet to be released. Right before you and I got on the podcast, this is the intensity of post-operative shivering is unrelated to axillary temperature. So this is 1994. Sometimes when patients come out of the operating room, they have been restrained, they have undergone this traumatic experience, and they will do something called post-operative shivering. The medical doctors used to think, oh, the operating room is too cold. These people are cooling off and the shivering is to warm up. That's not it at all. What's going on, especially brain surgery, especially children, sometimes after dental surgery, they will undergo this post-operative shivering. It's not the cold. It's the trauma being released from their body in exactly the way that Peter Levine says. So physiologically, you can fix your metabolism, you can fix your sex steroid levels, you can fix your thyroid. Psychologically, you change the way, you change your relationship to stress when you practice a regular ice bath. You can remedy those events that are out of your control and have left you in sort of a traumatized state can be released into the cold water when you allow the shivering to come. Brigham Bueller and Joe Rogan had a conversation about this. They're both Morozko customers. This is, I don't know, maybe a year ago. And they were talking about how it ain't easy running, ways to well. This is Brigham's new
Hmm.
wellness. I call it new. He's been at this for years, but now he's growing like crazy. It ain't easy taking on the FDA. It ain't easy, hearing people at the CDC call you a fringe epidemiologist, which is what Anthony Fauci said about Jay Bhattacharya. It ain't easy living out on that entrepreneurial edge. And I don't care if you're an MMA fighter or an entrepreneur or a first responder or you jump out of planes for a living. There is a constant series of stressful events, and the ice bath helps you manage that stress by releasing it into that cold water. So these are the benefits.
Yeah. Uh, for somebody listening, especially the female who's maybe not as familiar in the deep dives of health and wellness, you mentioned like females will see an instant raising of their testosterone. Why might they want that?
Because their testosterone is too low. Just like it is in men, uh, women suffer from all the same ill effects of testosterone that's too low. It's just that nobody's talking about the ladies.
Hmm.
Most women don't realize that testosterone is the dominant sex hormone in women. A healthy woman will have 3 or 4 times the testosterone in her bloodstream compared to estradiol. But nobody talks about it because men have 10 times the testosterone as women do. Testosterone is vital for female libido, for female well-being, for female mood. People who are depressed typically have low testosterone because testosterone is associated with mood and drive and willingness to put forth difficult effort. And that's true for women and for men. So, the number one reason why a clinician might prescribe testosterone to a woman is typically low libido. But
Mm.
some women have had their ovaries removed. There's one woman, she's a reader. She had a hysterectomy and what's called an oophorectomy. And I'm probably saying it wrong. But she had her uterus and her ovaries removed. So now she's surgically menopausal. And her clinician put her on testosterone replacement therapy, which is fine. Except when she started doing cold plunge, it ran her testosterone up to like 10 times what would be considered normal. And they had to discontinue the exogenous testosterone. Now she says she felt great. And I said, but didn't you grow a mustache? And she's like, heavens no. I feel more feminine than ever. She's in her 60s and she's no longer dependent upon the pharmaceutical because the rest of her body, not her ovaries because she doesn't have them, but her skin cells, her fat cells, and her adrenal glands are making plenty of testosterone. Women need testosterone too. It's just that people aren't studying it. Nobody's talking about it.
Obviously, the cold exposure in your Morozko is daily for you. Is there any other things that you try to do daily that improve or to take care of and try to maintain the longevity and vitality?
Yeah, I'm not the best. You can get a better example of longevity and vitality from people who are thinner and better looking than me, on Twitter. I do cold. Of course, I have a red light. I
Mhm.
have a green light. And of course, I try and get some sunshine in the morning, just
Mhm.
like Huberman tells me I should. I try to keep aware of my sunshine. That is, I want to make vitamin D from the sun. I want to make it from the cold. I don't take supplements, but I will take magnesium threonate. I get
Mhm.
magnesium from the Epsom salt, so transdermal magnesium in the Morosco. But I'll do magnesium as a supplement every once in a while. The big thing for me, which Jack Cruz would probably say I'm an idiot, is I'm going keto, in and out of keto. I'm particular about my food. I used to
Okay.
weigh 250 pounds. I weigh 210 now. My body composition is much better than it used to be. And I think it is primarily through improvements in my diet. I will go seasonal. I don't eat fruit in the winter anymore. I'll have fish. It's always a good time for seafood, but I will eat fruit in the summer. You up in Colorado, I think you grow peaches. Have you ever had a
Mhm.
peach straight off the tree? Tell me that's not good for you. If it's
Yeah.
in season, I'll take the blood glucose spike. I'll eat the dang blueberries right off the bush. And so d- one of the things that I watch more carefully than most people is my diet. Now I'm going to eat sourdough bread too. I'll even eat that during the winter. I've got a loaf of rye sitting on my kitchen counter calling my name even as we speak. I use Chase what's called the great food diet. If it's not great, I don't want to eat it. But if it's homemade and wholesome with like real butter and flour that doesn't have the additives like the folate or the bromates or whatever, I'm going to eat the dang thing. I will go in and out of keto. I will go in and out of carnivore. I don't stick to any particular diet or have any particular regimen. And my exercise pretty much stinks. Every time I go to the gym, I'm in there going, I could be reading a book. What am I even doing on this machine? It's terrible. My brain is doing great, but that's just the way I think.
Well, Thomas, I have a tradition on this podcast where I ask my guests two questions when we wrap up. I ask them, who do you think I should speak to next and why? And then the second question is based off of the Ralph Waldo Emerson quote: if you encounter a man of rare intellect, you should ask him what books he reads. What would be a book you most recommend?
Okay, let's go in reverse order.
Do it.
Most recommend is a tough one because you're asking me to stack rank, my favorites and give you just one. I don't know if I would most recommend this, but I will tell you the book that I go back to at least once a year. It is Andy Andrews. It's The Seven Decisions. when Joe Rogan was doing his comedy special. This goes back a couple of years. He was doing a Netflix comedy special. He was texting me about it. He's like, look, this Morozko is essential for, I'm trying to get ready for this comedy special and I need my Morozko and I need one for my wife because I got to keep mine at 34. It was only getting down to 40. And we had to swap it out, but I need another one for my wife so she can do 45 because she's not as crazy as I am. So he did his comedy special. Do you remember what he called it? Burn the Boats. That reminded me of Andy Andrews' Seven Decisions book because he tells the story of Hernando Cortez, who sailed over to the Yucatan Peninsula and defeated, the entire Mayan, Incan, Aztec. I don't even know what it was, but the whole Native American, armies, and he took all the gold. Andrew says when he landed his army in the Yucatan, he told his soldiers to burn the boats. He said, if we're going home at all, we're going to go home in their boats. And the entire book is like that. He's asking you, what are those excuses that you are floating in your mind that keep you from getting the things you say you want? Well, sometimes it's that boat, it's that ripcord, it's that escape clause,
Mm-hmm.
it's that way of giving up. So every December, I come back to Andy Andrews, The Seven Decisions, and he tells all these stories that inspire me to keep going. That's a great book. There are a ton of others. Reading, they say, reading's going to make you smarter. Reading changes your thoughts. Reading is a way of controlling what is on your mind. And so if you want to think about, I don't know, structured water, or you want to understand, the dipole connections between different molecules, you read a book on that. And it will keep your brain in sort of the state of constantly thinking about the problem that you're working on. Books are your intellectual environment that orient your own creativity. If I'm worried about marketing, I'll read Seth Godin, and he keeps my brain on marketing. And so I choose the books not for entertainment or curiosity anymore. I choose the books because they tell me the things that I want my brain to figure out. Hydrogen is a big one. I've got Alex Tarnav. I'm going to murder it. He wrote a book called Stress Hacked. Do you remember his name? Tarnavis,
I
perhaps.
don't.
Okay, hydrogen's a big one. So I'm in the middle of reading his book, and I want to get him on the podcast. Well, that's connected to Nick Lane. According to Nick Lane, who's written a lot about mitochondria, he says the most fundamental life on Earth is in the hydrogen sulfide vents at the bottom of the ocean. So what do I mean by fundamental? I mean the smallest discernible creature, the simplest creature that will explain some of the mechanisms that are embedded in all of us, whether that's the action of mitochondria or the action of hydrogen inside the living creature. So here I got Alex talking about evolution and the role hydrogen plays in the body. And here's Nick Lane talking about the hydrogen sulfide vents at the bottom of the ocean, which have the same chemistry that exists inside your body. Books help orient my own creativity towards the problems that I'm working on. So I will choose the books that align with the problems. I don't read a lot of fiction. But, while I got you on the podcast, I'll tell you something that I learned from my daughter. She went to ASU. And of course, she was in my lab, embedded with all my graduate students, and she's a digital culture major. And if I'm like, this is the most, you're majoring in YouTube. I'm embarrassed to be working at a university that even has a major called digital culture. But it was a good fit for her. She came up to me one day and she said, Dad, I'm taking a new class. I think I'm really going to like it. What's it called? She says, Medieval Modern Fantasy. I'm like, that's not a class. That's an oxymoron. You can't take a class like that for 3 credits. You should be taking rigid body dynamics, or, you should be taking physical chemistry because I'm an engineer. She goes, I don't know, Dad. It's pretty good. She comes up to me 6 weeks later. She goes, Dad, you remember that class, the medieval modern fantasy? I'm like, I do. She goes, well, we read Harry Potter. I've heard of Harry Potter. We read, Star Wars. I've heard of Star Wars. We read Lord of the Rings. I've heard of Lord of the Rings. What's your point? She goes, it's all good versus evil. And I go, yeah, I'm familiar. She goes, but not Game of Thrones. What do you mean? No, I'd never watched Game of Thrones. She goes,
Hmm.
see, in Game of Thrones, she's an evil bitch, but she does love her kids. It's morally ambiguous. And I'm like, what a great class. There are things we can learn in fiction that we could never explore in nonfiction. And they are the moral questions, the interminable, the unresolvable questions about what it means to be human are going to be explored in fiction. So if, there's some moral or philosophical issue that I really need to work out, Nick Lane's not going to help me. I've got to go to the heroic stories, coming out of Greece, or I've got
Hmm.
to explore, I don't know, East Asian mythology or something. If I'm going to grapple with those fundamental moral questions like, who am I? Why am I here? know? Uh, so I think books are great as a
Yeah.
way of stimulating your own thoughts.
I completely agree. I mean, I'm usually reading a 2-to-1 nonfiction to fiction. Um, so for every two, I'll usually go to a fiction. And as somebody who's read Tolkien, who's read, George R. R. Martin and read, Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, it's a very good point. Lord of the Rings is very good versus evil. There is no discernible good qualities on the evil. But if you read Game of Thrones, you have people that you root for, and then they start to sway you, and then you see their point, it's amazing, and this is really interesting.
Well, here's what she opened. This is why I'm never going to dump on the humanities or the liberal arts again. Um, Science fiction is an oxymoron. Science is all about reality and
Mm.
truth and the what can be observed and verified with our own senses. Fiction's all about what's made up. But science fiction is a way to stimulate our moral and technological imagination. It was Star Trek that invented the mobile phone because the
Hmm.
guy at Motorola was a big, we're going way back, the Gene Roddenberry version of Star Trek with William Shatner in it and stuff. And he saw the communicators, beam me up, Scotty. He says, I want one of those. And so he invented it. So these oxymorons are where creativity emerge. And I'm not going to crap on my daughter's, course selections anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're great. I originally was, growing up, got into reading, read a lot of the medieval, the fantasy, Game of Thrones, all that kind of stuff. And then now I've been reading a lot more. I have been shifting a lot more towards the science fiction, and it is really fun to see, especially if you read old science fiction. So, Dune and things like that, and you see how much of that is no longer science fiction, or you can see how much of it played a role in today's technology or tomorrow's technology. It's really cool.
You also asked, who should you have on your podcast? Here's an underrated guest,
Please.
Rick Cohen, MD. I can put you in touch. I had
Yeah.
Rick Cohen on my podcast, and the podcast is called Uncommon Living. The episode is, Are you tracking the wrong biomarkers? The answer is yes.
Hmm.
So Rick Cohen is a genius. He's a medical doctor. And I don't know if he's going to be a good podcast guest. I had to spend 2 days with him before we could even record 90 minutes that made sense to me because he's on another level. Rick thinks of health differently than any other medical doctor. Most medical doctors will think of health as a state. It used to be that medicine said health is the absence of disease. Well, you know what's not diseased? A dead body. It doesn't make any sense to think of health as a state. Health is a flow. It's a process, not a state. It cannot be captured by a lab report because health is not a noun. Health is a verb. Health is the things that are happening, not the things that are. And so Rick, he goes, I'm not interested in your VO2 max. That is not a measure of your health. And So I looked him up, and it's true. The association between VO2 max and longevity has been way exaggerated on social media. Rick says VO2 max is a measure of how much power your body can create, the rate of energy production. And that's relevant if you are like a power athlete. Then you need to know your VO2 max. But if you're just a guy who's trying to live like a long, healthy life, VO2 max is irrelevant. What I really want to know is how quickly does your heart rate after your VO2 max test return to resting? He says, what I really want to know is how fast do you recover? And I'm like, holy crap, Rick Cohen gets it. Health is not your bone density. Health is how quickly can you heal a broken bone.
Mm.
Health is not the state at which you exist. Health is how quickly do you move between states. Health is healing. It's your body's capacity to heal. Rick Cohen blew my mind. He's changed the way that I think about health. Health is a verb. It's not a noun.
That's really interesting. Matt Frazier, 5 times CrossFit Games champion. He, towards the end, after he was done, he's like, "Yeah, the reason I'm the fittest is because I recover faster than anybody.
There you
I can
go.
do a hard workout and give me 60 seconds, and I'm back to 95%
Yep.
capacity."
Yep.
It's really interesting.
I think Matt Frazier sounds like he gets it too.
Yeah, fit guy, fit human. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for your time today. This was an absolute pleasure. I'm really excited to go out and try the Morozko that's nearby. I'll take a picture. I'll send it to you, and go from there. But this was an absolute blast.
Come down to Phoenix. It's like $100 round trip ticket on a discount airline like Frontier. You come see where we make these things, and we'll get you in. Son.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying, my brother lives down there still, so I go visit all the time. Next time
Sounds
I'm there,
great.
I'll hit you up and we'll get in some cold
Good.
water.
I'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Thomas.